Welcome to episode 2 of the Ghost Furnace podcast. Today you'll hear about the folk practice of bottle trees and an interview with the owner of a creperie in a very old building with many strange occurrences. If you have a paranormal experience of your own that you would like to share, please email it to us at theghostfurnacepodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, please rate, subscribe, and review on whichever platform you use. Also, like and share us on Instagram and Facebook. The hosts of The Ghost Furnace are Nick, Pennsylvania, Bond, sometimes referred to as Brendan, and Mike. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
I had seen it more into southern Appalachia and into like Mississippi and whatnot. You'll sometimes see glass bottles, and a lot. Sometimes it's on trees where there's like dying limbs, and they'll put glass on the branches. But more often than not, and more lately, I've been seeing where they tie bottles, almost like a decorative thing, almost like wind chimes or something like that. But here's the interesting thing: even though it's more of a decorative thing right now, these bottle trees can be kind of thought of as almost like a fetish. Like the African fetishes of nailing like rusty nails into wood, or the dream catcher, the Ojibwe, the northern Canadian, northern Midwest Indians, sometimes called Chippewa as well. The Ojibwe had the dream catcher, which kind of took off and became this kind of pan-American Indian thing, but much the same function. The belief was that any sort of spirit would become trapped into the bottle and then would evaporate in the sunlight or something to that effect. And it actually comes to the United States by way of Africa, by way before then, it seems, from the Middle East. And it kind of goes through the Middle Passage through the slave trade. And a lot of, apparently it seems that the African-American experience, we see this kind of start with them and then permeate into the larger folk culture. And so now, even though it's more decorative, it has that purpose. Now, interestingly enough, and a lot of the kind of folk medicine of this region too, we see a similar thing, and that's rag trees, where instead of it being glass that's capturing these spirits or evil demons or ghosts, there's the belief of taking the clothes or the dirty rags from a person who's really profoundly sick with like the flu or with smallpox back in the day. That was very popular for a time. Taking those rags from the sick bed and tying them to a tree in order to heal the person. I don't know what the success rate was, but around here, apparently it was called padding. And I believe it was from what I've seen, it seems to have been fairly known within the Pennsylvania Dutch community and into northern and into southern Appalachia as well. Interesting, but just kind of wanted to bring that up because I don't know. I have seen around here some bottle trees.
That's really interesting. I've heard of the rag tree stuff before, just by going with like Long Lost Friend and stuff like that. So I'm vaguely familiar with that. The bottle tree thing sounds really cool. First off, just from like a folk art standpoint, I'm gonna have to look some of this up. I'm really curious about it. But your analogy to the dream catchers and the other fetish stuff kind of reminds me of like the Fae idea of using iron to keep out things, whether that's horseshoes or nails or whatever. I think that it's interesting that almost every culture, no matter where it comes from, has these sort of like protective elements.
And you mentioned The Long Lost Friend, and just for anybody who's not familiar, The Long Lost Friend is a German language book originally printed in Eastern Pennsylvania, but it's actually a Catholic grimoire. It has a bunch of German Catholic things for putting out house fires and for curing various horse ailments, and it's a supremely interesting book. But I believe you are correct. It's been a while since I looked it through, but I believe utilizing rags from the sick person, tying them to a tree or putting them in the hottest part of the fire is contained in that book as well.
Mm-hmm. But I do really like the idea of anything you put up to ward off different things. Because so much of folk magic and so much of these different traditions, regardless of what religious or cultural base they have, there's a lot of idea of protecting, like a household. Protecting from, spirits, especially negative spirits, but also allowing good ones to come in as well. With the bottle trees, you said they're always hung as like wind chimes, and they're becoming more popular now as just, like you said, almost just artistic pieces to begin with. And I assume that kind of has happened with the whole Dreamcatcher thing too, where there's certainly an aesthetic element to it, but it also has a cultural relevance as well. I'd love to hear from someone from that culture who is an expert on bottle trees and just the idea of where that comes from a practical standpoint, because it can't be too. I mean, I could be speaking way out of turn here. How old are glass bottles?
Glass bottles have been around for quite some time because, in fact, canning, as we know it, canned foods, like we know the Napoleonic Wars, they were canning foods in wine glasses and everything, from like peas and such like that. So, and again, from everything I know, from what I've read from different folklore stuff pertaining to Appalachia, this practice is seen in Arabic countries, and then it seems to have come into the United States again through the slave trade. So
yeah, that's so interesting. I'm gonna look into this more because this is something I've never heard of.
Bottle trees, check it out, and let me know what you learned from it. I've kind of shared all I know, and I imagine that the number of bottle tree experts out there is probably few and far between.
Well, if we can find them, though, I'd love to talk to them, is all I'm saying. If you're out there, please email us. Hey, so I was able to go down the other day and spend a little bit of time with one of our good friends, Seth, from Wunderbar here in Harmony, PA. This is a crepe, breakfast, coffee, cafe type place. Really everything breakfast and brunch related. We've been patrons of this place since it opened. Seth is an incredible guy. He's a great storyteller. And he was nice enough to spend some time with me and talk about some of the paranormal related happenings around the Wunderbar. So I hope you guys enjoy this little interview. It kind of starts quick because as you're gonna be able to hear, Seth is a great storyteller, super talkative guy. We had a really, really good time. So I hope you guys enjoy it.
I think I know what the situation is. So there used to be a lady named Jo, and she worked at the rock shop. She's passed, but she was a really cool lady. If you look above, over here, and again, you gotta understand, I don't subscribe to these, right?
Yeah.
There's a little crystal there, right? So you say, whenever you break something apart, whenever you're moving into a new space, use this, it deflects, bad spirits, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll chuck it up there, I'll let Joe, Then we took down this wall, and that's when all kinds happened,
Really?
Yeah, so it was after that.
Because I remember how it used to be here.
Right. Yeah. So, so you come back here. Are you recording?
Yeah, I'm recording.
Okay.
Yes, you just go.
You come back here, right? And this is where we're going, and I will back here. So one of our prep cooks, Jen, who was here for a long time, she would hear whispering in her ears. She had something breathing behind her before. Just really strange things happening. You could hear people running behind the walls. So she would get here at 5 in the morning. She puts in headphones because she just got sick of it, So we're whatever. Lord Donna's I'm going to.
They claim they're good. I'm all set.
So, Lord Donna's coming in. We're going to sage this place, right? It's before we did meditation. So we have our priest comes in later. This is, and that is relevant. So walk down here, right? And I'm whatever. I'm just throwing off me. I go through here into the bathroom, and the weirdest feeling, all the hair on my arm just starts standing up, right? And once I get here, like in this corner, it's just where like back here, it's just the weirdest sensation. And I'm like, ugh. So I start freaking out. And she had gone at this point, right? And I'm like, you need to go back in there. We need to sage that. There is something wrong in there. She's like, I know. So she comes back in and sages it. And I just hear the loudest pounding on this wall. Okay, all the stuff off the...
And that's the kitchen in there.
Yeah. So all the stuff off this wall in the kitchen and on this shelf.
Oh,
but the way it fell wasn't like it just tipped over.
It was like clay.
So we heard that. I heard stuff falling.
Yeah.
And I'm like, run! And I run past her, and she's like ready to kill me at this point. So I'm just like, out of here, you know? So and she's like, yeah, why'd you leave it there? I don't know. Thought I'd be brave. But yeah, so we're like, I'm just I'm waked out. And we had the windows open because it was summer, and we're trying to...
And no one else was in there. And obviously,
no,
it was a kitchen. No one would mess stuff up on purpose.
Right.
So.
And so, like, it was just the weirdest thing. So, that's kind of, like, that was the strongest, most crazy thing that's happened here. Since then, this hallway gives you you can feel breezes going behind you. It's always at certain times. Once it starts getting dusk, it's what I just don't come in this hallway or this bathroom.
It's like right now.
Yeah. So like we're still got a little while. It's like but
because this used to be where we're standing. Whenever this was the general store, what was it before that? Do you know?
It was it's been so many things. It was an opera hall. At one point, it was a restaurant. And there was a machine shop.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's been so many different things. Like the Frowns have their own thing. We had ghost hunters come in here, and they've told us like all these different stories. They had the equipment. What's the thing they sit down and like there's energy,
Oh, like EMF meters?
I guess,
or or spirit boxes, or...
They come in though, they're like turn on and like whatever. They put it down on this table, and it would not quit going off.
Oh, okay.
And like they were like, oh, something wrong? And they're like trying to mess with it. And then when they moved it, it was fine. Right here,
so something in that area, they think.
Oh yeah, so that's what I mean. Like I don't mess around back here. You know?
So this area is just
Yeah. So and then we've had. I was telling one of our employees, Natalie, about this stuff. And here, you can come over here. I'll show you. So I was telling her about it. She's all wigged out, and I'm like, come back. Okay. We had these things sitting right here, right? And after I got done telling her, we heard something moving, and this went and landed there.
that far away.
Yeah, and it didn't land.
Yeah, it's not like it just
And there's not. There's not much room for those, so there's nothing to push it out.
Yeah. There's literally no reason that would, even if they were like stacked weirdly,
right?
It wouldn't end up the whole way.
And it wouldn't land that way.
Yeah,
you wouldn't think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that the cup
strange.
thing I told you about with Stephanie.
The cup flipping.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because you have two people seeing it too.
Yeah. Now we have a girl Dakota here who gets probably the most. She gets messed with the most. It's just little stuff.
Yeah.
So there's like, if you go back in the kitchen, there's a shelf. You can see it like right here. There was one of those heavy bottles, like those olive oil bottles.
Yeah.
When she's walking by, it slid and fell down. It cleared the sink. See how far?
Yeah. That's like a good 18 inches.
Yeah.
Again, an olive oil bottle isn't just gonna.
Yeah, and a lot of times she'll have things fall that don't. That's minor. These little things fall around her all the time.
Yeah.
So
and again, like an old building, like you could explain some stuff falling.
Yeah.
If it's just on its own.
Just slide and clear and fall.
When it's a little different. Like
it got to the point. It's gotten to the point actually where we're like, I've gotten so freaked out and I'm back around to like it almost being normal at this point that things are going to happen. So the investigators, they've experienced stuff that I didn't. So supposedly there's like a younger couple that inhabits the prep kitchen, a teenager couple, and we think the girl is jealous. That's what they think. So she messes kind of like, we have a lot of younger girls here. And so they kind of, whatever it is messing with her. There's supposed to be another entity up here which does that stuff. And then the Frau's have one too named Harriet.
Really?
Yeah, so Harriet at one point, that side used to be, you could see the picture over there too. It used to be a oyster restaurant.
Yeah.
And so you'll get every now and then in different spots a whiff of like almost like ocean or kind of like a
Like salty, like sea.
yeah. Like but it doesn't smell good.
Yeah.
It's like fishy.
Yeah.
And it disappears and it'll kind of breeze by you.
Wow.
And so, but there, whatever's over there kind of helps them out. Sometimes they'll, if they're standing away from their oven, and I've witnessed this, you'll hear the buzzer going off and it'll stop. Something shuts it off.
Wow. So it's almost like a helpful spirit in some way.
Yeah. So these ones are ornery. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
The last one is back here. And this is totally separate and outside. This is like the room we rent out, right? Mm-hmm. And so whatever's back here is an angry entity. There's something that's mature. Mm-hmm. They think it might either be a Native American that something happened to around here, or someone that was abusive, and it might even be like to the kids that are here. Mm-hmm. But it stays back here. Again, that's another one that I was like, whatever, I'm back here all hours.
Yeah,
I'm like, I never really felt anything until I came in here one night, did this, flipped this off, and felt behind me. And I'm like, straight beeline, right? But I go to that hallway.
Yeah.
And the light switch is right there. So I'm walking by and flick it. And when I did that, I felt something touch my arm.
Touch your arm.
Yeah. So it was all, that was all.
It was like following you out, like saying like, hey man, it's time to go.
I was just out. Yeah. It was like way later than I should have been here. It was like a full moon or something. It was something crazy like that. I remember hearing about it afterwards.
Again, you're kind of like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. And again, because I'm a skeptic, so I was like, whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And every time you get a little bold around here, something happens.
Yeah.
So
now, do you feel like this stuff happens in waves generally, or is it like
I would say so.
Is it like consistent throughout like the?
No, I would say more waves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it depends on who. You know, for anybody listening, Loredana is a Reiki practitioner. So she's way more open to energies.
Yeah.
And things happen more to her.
Yeah.
The other girls that work here, again, female presence, always. It's a way more strong with them. Whereas, like, male presence, we're kind of left alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I said, the ones in the kitchen are mischievous. What's back here, and again, it's kind of hard to put into words. I've never really felt it except that one time. But whatever it is not good. It's not like a good.
It doesn't. Yeah. It's clear. It's clearly has something. Yeah.
Yeah. So. But I only had that one experience personally. But the ghost hunters are back here, and as soon as she came back, said that she felt a presence here. It was like the hand was on this window, and we were sitting over here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, we can go there. And they had another piece of equipment that would put out words.
Oh yeah, like spirit box type thing. Yeah. Or what they call it, a Frank's box. Yeah.
Yeah, and it kept saying like cellar. Or basement, and I'm like, no, it's here, but I'm not.
Yeah, no, we're not.
Right? So I don't know what's down there, but if you've ever seen his basement, it's like Evil Dead basement. It's
I've seen some of the other ones in town. And I imagine
it's just total dirt and
stone,
rock. Yeah, it's all it is, and it's super old. It's 1875. This building.
Yeah.
But in the middle of the night, at midnight, 1 in the morning, I'm not going to explore it.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It's just you're at that point, like you're asking for trouble,
right? And
especially if you're someone who believes that, like, for these spirits to like have any kind of energy, like it requires us. Like it's a sympathetic thing that's happening. You go into some place like that when you're already primed.
Right.
Like, of course of course you're gonna get freaked out. Of course something bad's gonna happen because you're just ready for it.
Right. And they got a lot of hits on the that little hallway there. I mean, there was it kept saying water when it was out front, and I'm like, I know what that means. That's by the sink.
Yeah.
The sink in the bathroom, and every now and then you'll hear the sink go on.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's just
Cool.
especially at night. And again, I just got to the point where like I leave that hallway alone.
Yeah, you just don't touch it.
It's a mutual respect.
Well, that's just what I was about to ask. Do you think that's what it kind of comes down to? Like, because I mean, you're trying to run a business here. You don't want something scaring away your employees, obviously, and everything. So, like, do you feel that like you guys give it that mutual respect so that it's, even if it is like you said ornery, it's not like destructive?
Yeah, I don't think there was anything destructive. Again, that stuff fell off the wall and the pounding. Mm-hmm. But we were looking for it because I have done events here at night and never had any problems. So I think when there's a lot of people, it's a lot less active. Yeah. When you're by yourself, I don't know if it's...
gets a little more bold.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's even a fear thing because even like I'm still not. I wouldn't say I was afraid. Yeah, I'm not afraid to be here, but I do have a boundary. Like,
but you're conscious of it.
Yeah. So I and again, if there's a bunch of people here, I don't think that's an issue. But me personally, I'm not willing to cross that boundary anymore. You know? I just let it be.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Now, one of the last questions I have for you: for how old this place is? You said what, 1875? 1875. Do you feel like just in general, because this place has been occupied by so many different people over such a period of time, that like it's just kind of like it comes with the building?
Yeah, for
almost.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think anybody would tell you that in town. I think in Harmony, historic Harmony alone, like you look everywhere, there's just so many stories. And again, it's a lot of rational people. It's people that are skeptical, like myself. But everybody has a story, whether it's the inn or here. Yeah. I'm sure across the street,
kind of thing.
I would think like Harmony itself has to be haunted, not even so much the buildings, right?
But just the area.
Yeah. Because I mean, you have the old tanning wall over there. There's just so much history right in this little small divot down here.
Yeah. So, that it's almost like a natural thing that just kind of happens over time. And again, like you were saying, a lot of it isn't like scary. Yeah. It's just like, but it's there, kind of.
Yeah, and then Logger House, I haven't talked to them. But
they have to have stuff.
I would think so, yeah.
Either way, a place just if I was a ghost, I'd hang out there. Like it's just
a cool basement.
Yeah, cool basement. It smells like cinnamon all day. Like why wouldn't you want to be there?
Yeah.
But no, this has been great, man. I really appreciate it.
Sure, yeah.
This is a cool little snippet of both history and a bunch of like you said, it's not like you guys have like full apparitions walking around all day, but it's tons of little stuff that happens to so many people over such a long... Because how many years have you guys been here?
I started in 2014.
Yeah.
And again, I think it goes back to the construction is when we really started seeing like things happen.
Yeah, but you have that many consistent people having those experiences over 6-7 years. That's a pretty significant body of evidence. So
yeah, and I don't know when Josh has started, but they bought it.
So, guys, that was my interview with Seth from Wunderbar Coffee and Crepes in historic Harmony, PA. Just want to thank Seth again for giving me some of his time, and yeah. So, what did you guys think about it?
I did like having to listen to you chase Seth around the building, and I know how because I'm pretty intimately familiar with the place as well, and I mean, I've been all throughout the building, and it is a lot bigger than you might realize upon first blush. If I think a lot of people, I mean, I grew up in town there, and I've known that building for the past 3-4 owners. And hearing him run all about the place was funny to me.
Yeah, it was one of those things where like as soon as I got in there, he just started going, and I turned the recorder on, and we just went because he had so much to talk about. It wasn't like he had one spooky little thing happened once. And again, this is something that I think that we talk about all the time is if one little thing happens, you kind of write it off. But he's been in that place for 6 years now, almost 7 years. Stuff just keeps happening, and it happens to lots of people who work there, it sounds like. I have a good friend who was a barista there for a period of time. I think he might mention the story when it's on tape about him and this friend of mine watching a coffee cup levitate, rotate, and sit back down on the shelf behind the counter. And they both, it was busy, and both of them were just like, what the hell was that? And they were like, well, but you got to keep working. So you just got to keep going, But yeah, I had always assumed that place had some ghost stories, but I had no idea the extent of activity. I thought it was interesting that he mentioned that they had some other, I guess, like ghost hunting teams, it sounded like, in there previously who had found a few different things, or at least what they think what they would call evidence, But it sounds like a lot of what they found kind of corroborated some of the things Seth was seeing, and his employees were seeing. When it comes to stuff moving or people just feeling things in certain areas, or even if there are in fact multiple entities in this area, how they have different personalities and have their own kind of space and interact with people accordingly, which I think it's fascinating, the fact that some people could work somewhere that has that kind of activity and it just kind of becomes almost normalized with part of your day-to-day workload, I guess.
Now, when he said they took a wall down during construction, that's when things started to happen more.
Mm-hmm.
Was he? Do you know if that was whenever he first took over the business?
I believe it was after whenever he first started doing crepes there was a wall in the back whenever Darn Yarn Needles had that space.
And you know what they say a lot of times, the typical story is that either people move into a business or they move into a house and everything starts slowly happening, or it's when they start renovating things that things start to happen, is the typical story. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. You do hear that quite often, and that goes right along with a lot of the more high strangeness stuff that we end up seeing and looking into, where it happens during either liminal times in people's lives or times of change or turmoil of some sort, whether good or bad. It seems like it can stir stuff up. And I thought it was interesting. He talked about the neighboring establishment, how they have a spirit that's in that little section as well, but it's more of the helpful kind.
Right.
And just to show the different personalities that the spirits can have, or maybe more accurately, that we place upon these spirits.
Right. I almost wonder if taking that wall out could have just stirred up activity in that specific area of the building with how big it is, if things were already happening in other parts of the building. But I personally had never heard a story about this building, to be honest. What about you, Nick?
No. The quick answer is no. I haven't heard anything about it. Living in town as long as I had, there's a restaurant up the street, a block and a half, however you want to slice that distance, that kind of always overshadowed everything else in town, and that was where everything was supposed to be haunted. Second only to, I taught and teach at a music shop in town. It had previously been in another location. Now, one of the things I have to say that's interesting about the town, and Seth kind of talks about it, just, not only how many things had been in that building, but the history of the town as a whole. The town itself was started as a religious commune in the very early 19th century from a sect who came over from, it wasn't yet Germany then. I think they were from Bavaria or Saxony. Anyhow, the shop I teach at, I keep saying I taught at because it's in a different location now. The original location was essentially the leader's home. And then there was a regular basement there, and Bond, you were in there with me. There was another door in the basement that led to the original basement. And this was the first structure they constructed when arriving in the town, and it was very old, and there were old shards of pottery, and the joists were just big oak timbers. It's spooky. And so when Seth talked about the basement there, that's what I was remembering. And the only other haunted stories I really knew in the town dealt with that basement, which is the figure was Father Rapp. And interestingly enough, he is mentioned in Lord Byron's Don Juan epic poem. A lot of people think it's pronounced Don Juan. which you would think, but actually the rhyme scheme of the poem itself suggests that it's Don Juan for whatever reason. That has nothing to do with this story, but so
But
there's
important nonetheless. Yes.
right. So there's a haunted restaurant that has overshadowed everything, and then there was some conversation about this basement, which Bond and I were able to experience through my teaching at the shop in the leader's home. So that was an extremely long-winded no, Mike. I've never heard any stories about that place.
No, but I think what you're touching on though is that like the town itself, and this is something that Seth said in this interview, and something you guys are going to hear repeated in another interview that I conducted with someone about the area. Just there's so much has happened, and it's such an old area that you wouldn't be surprised to hear that anything has a ghost story related to it, which is cool, but also I think brings up the issue of, like we always talk about, being primed for it in certain areas. Like if you're in a super old creepy basement, whether or not anything paranormal is actually happening or not, you're going to be looking for that subconsciously.
And I live in Harmony, just a few blocks from this building. I took my dog out, and my dog has never growled. I've never heard him growl at somebody aggressively or at another dog. He's a very friendly dog. And the one night a few months ago, I had him out back, and he just started growling at nothing. Like he was looking in the direction where it was basically open, and I could see nothing. Like there was nobody, nothing there. So I have no idea what that was about. But he wouldn't go to the bathroom. I took him back inside, and it's never happened again.
That's weird.
But it's like you're saying, you know, if you're in a creepy old basement, yeah, you might get that feeling. But this was something I do every day, and I've never had it happen before.
Well, and that's the thing. If you're someone who believes an area can just be, whether you want to get into John Keel type window areas or anything like that, but the idea of places like a town being just more spiritually charged or whatever, then, you know, running into something weird just walking your dog kind of fits in with that narrative. Again, whether it's true or not, it fits in with the narrative at least.
Nick mentioned that Harmony was founded in 1804, but even before Harmony was founded, it was a murdering town.
Well, it was murthering is what I understand from. There's a 7 Years War historian that lives in the region, and actually that title of murdering town didn't come until almost 100 years after the event. There was an offshoot of the part of the Iroquois Confederacy had a camp, a small, just a way station on the way up through the trails, and that was known as Murthering Town at one point. But one of the things you're both hitting on, the thing we always touch upon is being primed for something, and one of the things I'll say, listening to Seth talk about Laura Donna and her being into Reiki, and he says the thing that I hear in so many different statements is that, well, she's just more in tune with these sort of things or something to that effect. I think that's a priming of a kind as well, because if you're already open to believing in it, or do believe in it, or believe in this transference of energy, this sort of ether sort of thing, well, when these sort of things come, do you just go, well, of course, I'm already kind of open to that idea, I'm going to stop there? It makes me think back to, I talked before about, I had a radio in my house in the basement where my bedroom was, and it would go off. And it would freak me out because it would seem to be random, but it turned out to be the neighbor across the street's garage door opener. Their automatic opener would set it off. Now, if I believed in ghosts, or if I believed in these energy fields and things like that, would I have stopped looking because this strange instance all coincided with something I was willing to believe?
Absolutely.
Would I be primed in that way, and therefore never have continued to search until we were able to determine that it was the garage door opener?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's what gives the instances that Seth talked about that much more credence. Because even though, like you said, kind of primed for it in certain ways, you think the place is already kind of haunted, the examples of like the jar falling or the cups falling, Again, unfortunately, because of podcasts, you guys couldn't see what I was seeing when he was explaining this. But with what he said happened, and all these had multiple people seeing it. It's not like it's just like, something he saw out of the corner of his eye. When you see what happened, it makes you realize like he actively is trying to debunk these things. He's not just assuming every little thing is paranormal.
He also said he's a skeptic.
Yeah, he's a self-described skeptic. Absolutely. The one story when he was talking about being in that bathroom and hearing the pounding on the wall and stuff falling off of the shelves on the other side of where the bathroom's at. Anyone who has worked in a kitchen for any period of time knows that like the last thing you do is mess up clean things, so like the odds of that being someone messing with him are just, they're almost non-existent. It would be more likely that it was a small earthquake or something like that. You'd have to go to some other extreme to explain it. But talking about just like the bad feeling he had in that area, after we finished the recording, you guys probably remember the part whenever he was explaining that story, he said usually around dusk, it's when it kind of gets bad around here. And I kind of joked. Yeah, both joked like, right now, like, haha, kind of thing. After we finished the interview, we stood around talking and everything. Whenever we were closing up shop, he hit the light switch because you know how he talked about the more negative or just more aggressive entity in the back that breathed on him and then touched him whenever he was turning the lights off. He turns the lights off and then says to me, "Do me a favor, walk down that hallway." And I don't think twice about it because again, I've never, as many times as I've been in that place, never gotten a weird vibe off of it or anything. And to be true to ourselves, this is about as primed as I could possibly be because we just got done talking about it and everything. So that's to be taken into account too, I think. But I was like, sure. So I literally walked down that hallway, and as soon as I hit the threshold of those doors where the one wall used to be, in my opinion, you could feel a definite like change in the atmosphere. I didn't get like a bad feeling. It wasn't like I could physically feel anything, but there was some sort of palpable change. And I spent the next 5 minutes walking up and down that hallway, looking at it, feeling the same thing. And I'm looking at Seth and I'm like, what in the world is that? And the whole time I'm thinking there's this one window up there. I just had the impression that something was looking at us from that window. And I kept saying, what the heck is that? And finally I turned to him and I'm like, you know what I think it is? And he says, that window. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, what the hell's up with that window? And he goes, I don't know either, And again, it was just like a vibe like, hey, this isn't it felt more territorial than anything. It was just like, hey, it's now dark out. This is my space kind of thing. It was a really freaky feeling because again, he just said, do me a favor, walk down the hallway. I wasn't, of course I was proud to a certain extent, but I was surprised at how the energy of that space did change.
And it's immediate and as had been described.
Yeah, exactly. And it was literally like the threshold of the door. So like you could literally be standing on one side of it, didn't feel anything weird. As soon as you walk past that, it just felt different. And that's if you're someone who believes in things feeling certain ways, which I obviously do. But it was a very strange. It was just a little bit strange. I'm not even going to say it was an event, but it was a little bit of, I think, confirmation of what Seth was talking about.
Did he give you any kind of explanation as to why he said to walk down the hallway?
No.
Okay.
I think
afterwards.
No, I'm next time I talk to him, I need to ask him about that because, like, I don't know if maybe he saw something down there or just wanted some validation on his own, or maybe
right.
he got touched. Maybe he got touched again when turning the light up because it was, like I said, like we were in the process of leaving. Like everyone else is out of the building at this point,
Yeah.
And he knew I was not recording anymore, so it wasn't like he was like, oh, this would be a good, ending for the episode or something like that. It was, I mean, again, I believe everything that comes out of that guy's mouth, and he was just like, hey, just do yourself a favor, walk down the hallway. And I walked down, turned around, and I was like, what the hell is that? But yeah, it was a really the journalist in me is sad because I shouldn't have turned my recorder off. But
Right.
What would you really have gotten other than
no, other than me sounding like a wuss. That's about it. Again, complete transparency. Like I did say whenever we were leaving. After that, I just said like, sorry if we were intruding at all. No offense meant. Have a good evening. Just because like I'd rather say that to nothing than accidentally upset something, because I don't want coming back on Seth. So.
I thought it was funny because he mentioned where the Fraus are. That used to be an oyster restaurant.
Oh yeah.
And I was thinking how unfortunate you walk into the bakery and you smell oysters.
Yeah, that's like that's not
what you want to expect.
For how historically good that place smells. That would be really off-putting. You're absolutely right. I hadn't thought about that.
One of the things I'll say about it, I mean, it's a wooden building, and we know how wood can trap smells and everything. Mm-hmm. And there's been lots of, stories where they say like cigarette smoke or tobacco smoke and whatnot, not like taking into account how omnipresent those smells were in our world until really recently.
Yep.
Like, if you ever pick up an old book or anything. But also that, personally, having bought a house that had been trashed, and we had to fill 3 full-size dumpsters to get everything out. The place smelled terrible. I had to go in with a respirator to clean out that basement, and we had cleaned that place spotless. But every once in a while when we were in that house, when it would rain, I could still smell like the faint memory. It almost like, was it in my head? I don't think so. I could smell it only when I was on the wooden stairs. So wood can really trap some aroma.
That's very true. That's very true. And I think that's something that you have to take into account when talking about, again, a building that's basically all wood and this old.
And how long it was an oyster house, we don't know. And but it is all wooden. And so I totally believe that is a real thing that happens.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Yeah.
There's that whiff, but I don't think there's anything unexplainable about that. One thing I will take a moment of pause for, there was a time when oyster houses were really popular and common.
That's true.
As were hash houses, and nowadays we don't have many of either, and that's unfortunate.
I think we need to start a campaign to bring back oyster houses as a popular destination.
Agreed. I mean, sorry, oysters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I never have heard any of those stories. And really, a lot of the accounts, apart from the spirit that's in the Fraus is somewhat helpful. I mean, the other ones were pretty possessive.
Yeah, definitely at least mischievous,
Because the dark entity that he mentioned, I mean, that, like you said, that's a very territorial feeling you had. And then he mentioned the one in the prep room. It's like a female who they feel like is very possessive of her boyfriend. And
it kind of goes after some of the which is like not great, But it's weird because, like, again, for how many times? Because I've spent hours and hours in the back of that place on my computer, and never. But again, I've only been there during the day when it's been light out, the little bit of experience that I've had there after dark.
Well, not only that, but any kind of noises you might hear, you can easily explain away because you're just a customer in a restaurant.
Yeah, and I think, again, that's why, like, the stories that he did relate, for every one of those things that happens, there's probably 50 smaller incidences that are probably much easier to explain. But again, it's like when you have the volume of things, that's when it starts to get a little more, not necessarily credible, but it helps you suss out what may be paranormal and what may not be.
Right. Well, that place is often busy. There could be a lot more things that happen that get ignored because there's so many people around. You hear a bang and you just assume there's somebody on the other side of the wall.
Yep, absolutely. That's an excellent point. But yeah, no, I just thought that, again, we've been very lucky with our storytellers so far on this show. I think Seth was a great storyteller. He's obviously super passionate about his business and the history around it. And, again, I just kind of really want to thank him for everything he does for the area, but also for taking a little bit of time out of his day to relay some of these, pretty incredible experiences to us.
Yeah, Seth's a solid guy. There's no doubt about